evening. This is Maurice Carter. I'm the president of Sustainable Newton. Tonight, we are very fortunate to be joined by several officials from the city of Oxford. We have Mayor David Eady, Council Member Laura McCanless, Council Member Jim Windham. Mayor Eady and Councilman Windham are both here on video. Council Member McCanless is here by audio only, but you'll be able to hear her. So we thank you guys for joining us. I thank the other folks that have joined here as well. This is something that we've wanted to do, Sustainable Newton, as we kind of spent the late spring and summer trying to find a way to keep engaged. Is we know that we have really great things going on in all of our cities, our county, other organizations that we want to make sure that our members, our followers are aware of, and we like the idea of having dialogue. We, Sustainable Newton, from the beginning have seen ourselves as an ally, as a partner with our local governments, our citizens, other nonprofits. And so, hearing what you guys are up to, what's important to you, sharing that with the citizens of our county is, we think, a real important part of all of us coming to a more sustainable way of moving forward. So, again, we really appreciate you being with us. I've got some questions, but I don't want to discourage you also, our officials with us tonight, venturing into topics that you think would really be of interest to this group. We're going to spend about an hour here. We don't want to keep folks all night. So, but I want to kick it off with a couple of questions that we had gotten from within the board, and then we'll go from there. So the first thing we were going to ask for all three of you is, what do you see as Oxford's greatest sustainability challenge? And what do you feel are your city's greatest assets for meeting those challenges? And Mayor Eady, I'll let you go first, and then the other two can jump in.
Great. No, I really gave that a lot of thought. And I really feel like our greatest challenge is the development that has occurred outside of our municipal boundaries, because it has impacts on the quality of life of all that live in Oxford, whether it be noise or air quality considerations, safety considerations, with the airport, with industry. We've had a couple of quarries. I mean, we have a quarry. We have had a couple of asphalt plants attempt to pop up adjacent to us. So we are severely impacted in those ways around our quality of life, but also, has impact on natural resources with the clearing of trees for development. Dried Indian Creek, which creates our eastern boundary, has been severely degraded because of development at the airport. And so, we really, I think, seeing the impact of development around us presents one of our most significant sustainability challenges, which unfortunately creates some limits to what we can do in response to it. I'll pass now to my fellow council members.
I would like to also add that I feel like we have in the community some inertia with buy-in that I think can be addressed, but is certainly present, that I kind of think about and am concerned about.
Are you through, Laura?
Yeah.
I didn't want to interrupt you. That's all. To further state what Laura was alluding to, I believe, is one of the biggest things for all municipalities, and in particular Oxford, is conventional wisdom. And everything that we're facing, that the city is facing, that the state is facing, that the United States is facing, is dramatic. And we have to think globally, act locally, but we need to get more buy-in, as Laura says, and think creatively. I hate to use cliches, but let's think outside the box, as it were. And there's a big cliche, but it's human. It's human nature. It's safe. But some of the answers of what we need is not going to be safe, in my opinion.
Well, I was realizing that I did not, and I don't think either of us, any of us, addressed the sort of what our greatest assets And I think that really our greatest assets, though, are our people in Oxford. We do have quite a bit of committed individuals who are willing to step up and work towards making Oxford a more sustainable community in all of its aspects. And so I think that's to be commended. We obviously have a huge asset with Oxford College of Emory University being within the city, and they've been a great partner in a lot of different ways. And we have the opportunity to tap into faculty as well as students from Oxford College. So I think our assets are the people that we have within Oxford that we can draw from.
I agree with that, but our relationship with the college is being redefined daily, because at one time the college and the city were synonymous. You didn't think about Oxford without thinking about the college. You didn't think about the college without thinking about Oxford. But with all due respect to those that are connected to the college or were connected to the college has become more corporate than it was in the past. We don't have nearly as many professors living within the city that we once had. They are, because of that, they're not as involved politically and or civically. And so we do have some notable exceptions of that. I see two of them here, and one of them that's a past employee of the college. So, I'm not trying to kick anybody in the shin, but it is changing, and we need to recognize that and take advantage of what there is to be offered by the college. But at the same time, we can't live in the past and expect things from the college that it just cannot deliver any longer.
All right. Well, thanks on that. And Mike, I see you made it, and you sent me a question. I think it would be a good follow-up to the question we just had. If you've got it and want to read it, please feel free. Mike, you're on mute.
You're muted, Mike.
There you go. Mike, unmute.
Mike, you're not being recorded.
All right. Well, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and read his question. I'm going to read Mike's question, and he would probably do it better than I would. But one component of sustainability is to preserve qualities of life that Oxford residents consistently identify as high value. Features such as relatively quiet town, walkable streets, small town feel, tree canopies, socially integrated neighborhoods. Another aspect of sustainability is financial viability of the city. Do you see those two goals as being in conflict? If so, what approach would you advocate to resolve the dilemma?
I don't see them in conflict. You were breaking up just a little bit, Maurice, but if I understand it, it's sort of the things that we love about Oxford.
Yeah, it's sort of is there a trade-off between the promoting the quality of life and doing so in an economically viable way?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that Oxford, in part, it's because we're sort of in a unique situation where we don't have a lot of commerce and we don't have a lot of area to expand with residential or anything like that. So I think fighting development, which is often something that takes away from those things that Mike illuminated, it isn't going to be a primary problem for us. And I think that thinking creatively, we can absolutely work within happy economic margins and in fact enhance our economic position by preserving what we have and continuing to develop our green belt and things like that, and trails.
Yeah,
I was able to turn off my mute button.
There it is.
One of the areas that we've talked about that's important for us in sustaining Oxford and the things we love are the natural landscapes that we have, and the things that we can continue to do to maintain and further enhance those landscapes will also increase the value of properties in the town and make Oxford a more attractive place for folks that want to come live. And so those are things that will continue to help us maintain our viability. And we've had councils in the past that have really worked to put us in a very positive financial position relative to, particularly relative to some of our neighboring communities and communities throughout Georgia. I mean, we are in a very good position financially. And so, we can afford to even do a little more in terms of investing in the sustainability of Oxford than we have up to this point, and not even begin to really create a negative situation economically. Now, that said, we're in a unique time right now with the COVID pandemic and the effect that that's having on our economy. And we're feeling in our local economy because a lot of our revenue comes from our electric utilities and water utilities, and Oxford College being closed down since middle of March, has obviously reduced a lot of that revenue, but we don't see that as a long-term proposition. So we're in a good position. We're resilient. We can weather that storm and just continue to press forward.
Okay, and Jim, did you have
I beg your pardon?
anything to add on that?
Well, we're in kind of a confused state right now because, on the one hand, we want to maintain and improve our landscape, as David said, and which is a huge asset to the city. And I think I sent out a thing today that said in 2012, the thing that we needed to shoot for was 30% of trees and that type of coverage, natural coverage, in order to have a viable atmosphere. And but then we also have a DDA who's been charged with creating some commercial within the city, and so we got to determine whether that's in conflict or not, and if exactly how much. And so we've got a lot of decisions that need to be made moving forward, and defining what sustainability is to everyone. I was very fortunate to be involved with Mike and Laura and David and Juanita and some other folks having a sustainability committee just before we were fortunate enough for David to be elected mayor. How'd that sound, David? And
good job.
And because David has a unique attitude where all of this is concerned, because it's, as you pointed out, Maurice, that's part of his day job, and it has been in the past. So he's not just coming to the party. He's been a participant in the party for quite some time. But there are decisions that have to be made in that regard. Do we do development? We don't do development. We do any development? What kind of development? If we choose not to do development, then what do we do? Then what do we want Oxford to be? Why do we want Oxford to be defined? What do we want people to think of when they think about Oxford, and so forth and so on? So,
Well, Jim is doing a good job of summarizing what some of the conversation was about. I don't pretend to speak for the city, but just to offer a tiny bit of retrospective commentary. There was a perspective among some members of the former administration that Oxford was facing some sort of financial downturn in terms of reduced revenues from utility sales. Those of us that looked into that didn't quite find the data to support the claim or the expectation that the city was going to see reduced. But there was a feeling among some members of the former administration that the solution to the problem, and I would put quotations around the problem, was to build our way out of it. So I did an exercise in which I worked with Matt Pepper, who was nothing but helpful, and looked at Oxford's revenues from water and electric. And I took 95% of that and moved it forward to the year 2026. In other words, I took 5% a year away from the revenues. And for Oxford to have to recapture those ostensibly lost revenues would take between 300 and 350 houses at the rate that Stacy and I pay ad valorem tax. And to do that, would be to smother our town and so much of what we value about it. The good news is we're not hearing that sort of Chicken Little sky is falling conversation since the new administration came in, and that's very reassuring. That the future of Oxford is not seen as a zero-sum game, where we can either have the wonderful quality of life that we enjoy, or we can stay viable as a city. And that to me and to other members of not only Sustainable Newton or the other people who are environmentally sensitive, but it's very reassuring that that language has apparently fallen into disuse, because that invites a totally different conversation about going forward. And I know that I'm not alone in being so thankful for the new mayor and the new lineup in city council to have sort of gone past that zero-sum game perspective. So thank the three of you for giving voice to a very different perspective.
But a caveat is that going forward, if technology continues to grow within the area that's Sustainable Newton began with, the solar and that sort of thing, it is going to diminish the income for Oxford in that regard now. And in the next 20 years, 30 years, David, where we have to start looking at signing new contracts with MEAG and that sort of thing.
It's about 25 years from now, 26 years from now.
And it could be a whole different economic landscape at that time for the city of Oxford. And how do we explore that and address that and still maintain the viable community that we all love? Of course, I probably won't be here in 25 years, so, but I would like to plant a tree or two that I'll see grow, mature.
That's a good attitude to have.
I do feel like it's worth mentioning some additional challenges that we face from a sustainability perspective, many of which afford us opportunity as well. I mean, we touched on the natural landscapes and how we continue to maintain our tree cover that allows us to keep the community cooler than it would if it didn't have that shade. Also helps us to sequester carbon. We also need to promote more pollinators by being strategic in what we plant in the city. So doing our part, to contribute to a healthy ecosystem there. We do need to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels for both on the transportation side. We have gasoline, guzzling vehicles, and looking at how we might transition that over time to more sustainable sources of power for those vehicles. And as we look at our electricity that we generate, that we receive from MEAG, that we buy from MEAG, how can we transition that into more sustainable realms? And so we're definitely looking at that long-term planning horizon and seeing how can we over time, as coal-fired plants that we bought into 20 years ago start retiring, how can we displace that with renewable energy such as solar farm power down in South Georgia, or maybe even some local power production as well. So I think being mindful of that, how can we get away from fossil fuels, but then on the sort of the socioeconomic arena, we need to address energy burden, because when I was talking with folks as I was preparing for the election to become mayor, a lot of folks talked about their electric bill and how high it could get during certain times of the year. And so, how can we flatten that curve for them with respect to the impact on their personal budgets and reduce their energy burden, because it tends to disproportionately affect those who are in the lower income brackets or have fixed income and can't necessarily absorb shocks of spikes in their electric bill. And then we need to look at our waste in the city. That's how can we better incentivize our residences to recycle, to divert waste? How can we be more mindful as a city? How can we get move towards maybe a net zero waste operation within the city by just doing things smarter in terms of how we manage our operations? So those are things, that may fall in the more traditional view of sustainability, but all have an impact on the quality of life for folks who live in Oxford, and may present additional, economic opportunity as we move forward.
May I say something?
Sir?
Going in a slightly different direction, but sustainability nonetheless. I think Oxford is in a unique position with the help of some folks such as yourselves. How can Oxford become the example of sustainability? How can Oxford re-engineer its streets to encourage more bicycling, more walking, more use of electric golf carts, those kinds of things? We unfortunately have a state route coming through the center of town, but there are laws on the books for DOT to deal with about biking. Maurice, you probably know more about this than anybody else, but there are laws regarding that for state roads where bicyclists can take up the entire lane. I don't want to get out there and try it, but it is there. So, but if we could, as a community, as a county, as a city of Covington and Porterdale, work with DOT and try to find ways to install bike paths, those kind of things, I think we're letting a lot of opportunities just slip by us because we're not putting forth a concerted effort. And I hope that's what this is partially all about, is to gather people, like-minded people, to help Oxford and the balance of the county at the same time. This is not a time to be particularly diplomatic or be incremental, as it were. This is a time for dramatic ideas and dramatic changes going forward.
If you do decide to try taking up the lane, I recommend Wesley Street before Emory Street.
Amen.
Personal experience.
I'm not even going to try Emory Street. I fought a lot of big guys in my life, and I lost almost every one of them.
One question we had included here, and you've kind of touched on it in some ways already, but I mean, our organization sort of came together initially as a shared interest in how we respond to the threat of climate change and the crisis that the planet faces in regards to the extreme weather and the changing climate. You guys, as local leaders, have that to deal with in terms of working with the public, and then you've got this more immediate crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic and the public health response to that. So just kind of interested in general, for you guys as leaders, what are the unique challenges that you're facing in this time with both of those crises that, maybe were different crises in the past?
Well, I'll lead us off with that. I think with the coronavirus pandemic, the primary challenge is keeping people in Oxford safe and healthy as much as we can. But there are a lot of things, many things associated with that are beyond our control as city officials. And so we focus on the things we can control, like shutting down City Hall until we know we can put things in place that will safeguard the health of our staff, the health of any visitors to City Hall, and make sure that we are doing the best we can do to minimize that health risk. We closed down our pavilion at the city park to group gatherings, and we closed down the playground because those were areas where people could come in close contact and spread the virus. So those were things that we could control. And we also, we canceled our 4th of July parade, which has been going on for my entire life, and we felt the pain of that decision. So we made some tough decisions. We took steps that we could control, that we had some control over. Similarly, with climate change, there are a lot of things that are beyond our control. And so we can focus on the things that we can control. I mentioned how we can look at our resource mix going forward. And as Jim said, when we get to the point where we're renegotiating contracts and what Oxford is buying in terms of electric power, that it is more renewable than it is currently. And how do we transition over time? And we've been in conversations of being a part of some solar development projects with MEAG. And what are, other ways that we can do our part, to promote residents or property owners to install solar panels on their houses, like when we remove any sort of fees that might create a disincentive and try to enable them. Jim's done a good job of advocating. Well, maybe we should look at even further incentivizing people to shift to electric power as we try to green up the power that we're supplying, by offering them discounts on or rebates for certain types of investments. So, there are things that we can control and things we can't. And so by really focusing on doing as much as we can, and I mentioned before about our tree cover, how can we be more aggressive, planting more trees to sequester more carbon, contributing to that overall sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere. How can we continue to transition our vehicles? We're looking at, as we look at replacing our police vehicles, maybe the first step is switching to hybrid vehicles that are available. We can learn from the study that was recently done for the city of Covington at how they might transition their fleet, and how we might transition ours as well. So again, kind of just focusing on the things that we can control and how we're contributing to the overall action to mitigate human-caused climate change.
Well, I also think it's important to have it be visible. As let us be an example. And Jim, you mentioned that earlier, setting a standard and having information available, and like with our pollinator gardens, posting that it is an official program and having additional information on the website is important and helpful just from a visibility standpoint, because I think it helps normalize efforts, which I think is really important for helping others be mindful with regard to climate change and changes that they can make.
Agreed. Yeah.
We can't convince, the hardest thing in the world to convince anybody that's already made up their mind is that climate change is real. I mean, you guys run into it every day. All of us do. And I've read several things where, you're wasting your time even trying to compute. From a psychological standpoint, you're wasting your time trying to convince them that it's real. But I think, as Laura says, if the more visible we make it, the more likely it is that we're going to hit a more appropriate button in somebody else's psychology. And instead of them taking a knee-jerk reaction and just automatically saying no, or not no, but heck no, then, as Laura says, they become more sensitive to it over time.
Well, I think one of the important things about taking action on climate change is many of the things that you would do are cost effective and will save money, whether it be investing in energy conservation measures to reduce how much power you're using. That's cost savings. If you look at, like, when we were talking with MEAG about buying into a solar development project in South Georgia, the more we bought up to a point, the more we saved. And so, a lot of that has to do with how cost effective solar panels are right now in terms of at a utility scale. And so taking advantage of that can save the city over $100,000 a year for a marginal amount of energy that we're purchasing. So those are things that are beneficial economically and easy to sell just on those bases, and we get the goodness of helping to mitigate climate change and trying to offset some of the carbon emissions that we're responsible for here in Oxford, as well as like planting trees that beautify the city and enhance property values. They also are sequestering more carbon. So, I think those are good things, and we should highlight those as well.
But as Laura said, we have to make the public aware of the benefits.
Absolutely.
Right. Mr. Windham alluded to this earlier, and Mayor Eady, thought it would be interesting for folks just a moment to talk about your day job, because we actually at Sustainable Newton have been able to take advantage of one of the programs that you're involved with at Georgia Tech. And I'd just be interested, you'd share a little bit about the program there at Georgia Tech, and then also how it benefits communities like ours.
Yeah, so I work with two centers at Georgia Tech that are focused on sustainability, and in particular focused on equipping students to go out and tackle some of the great challenges that we face in society, face at the local level, regional and state level, and globally. And obviously, many of the sustainability challenges we've talked about fit in that category. And so our centers in particular are focused on how do we do that? How do we equip these students? And the main way is through getting them exposure to real world challenges and give them opportunity to work on real world issues, and do that in partnership with communities, do that in partnership with businesses, so that they are getting a better appreciation and understanding of what the challenge really entails, the complexity of the challenge, and then working, collaboratively with others on coming up with solutions. At Georgia Tech, I think historically it's sort of had this technology focus where everyone was quick to come up with a solution. Let's develop a new gadget, and so we've tried to lead students to be more mindful of understanding first fully what the challenge actually is, what the problem is, what the issue is, robustly, and understand that by learning from the communities that are impacted by that challenge. And so it's very much an experiential learning focus in what we do. One of the centers is the Racy Anderson Center for Sustainable Business, which is in the Scheller College of Business at Georgia Tech. And the other is the Center for Serve, Learn, Sustain, which is in the Office of Undergraduate Education. And so, we have a reach across the university. And my job in particular is an industry engagement manager to create relationships with businesses and helping to bring those real world challenges to students, but also to help bring the expertise from Georgia Tech to businesses and helping them to understand how they can improve their business processes or change the culture within those businesses. One of the neat aspects of the work is aligning people outside of Georgia Tech, communities or businesses, with some of our students on exciting projects. And that's what you were referencing, Maurice, was through a sustainable business consulting practicum course that's co-taught by our managing director, Michael Oxman, and senior director or managing director from Accenture. We were able to invite Sustainable Newton to come and pitch a project. And you all did that in partnership with the city of Covington. And not every project that gets pitched gets picked by students, because the students do get to align with their interests. And this was a series of MBA students, and the project, which was looking at that how Covington might transition its vehicle fleet and the spectrum of those types of vehicles to more sustainable technologies, because I think there was some question, well, do we switch to natural gas or do we switch to electric vehicles? What are the alternatives, and what are the costs and benefits? What are the environmental aspects associated with each option? So you all were able to take advantage of a group of MBA students to dive into that over 12 weeks of a semester and give you some recommendations. And from what I hear, it was well received. So it's always fun to see that connection made, and all the more beneficial to see it being made within my own community. And I do consider Covington part of that broader community. And so when in answering the how can my role at Georgia Tech benefit Newton County, I'd love to share with more people in Newton County what the resources are available from Georgia Tech. And it's not just Georgia Tech. The University of Georgia has opportunities as well, because they also are trying to train their students, teach their students how to take on these grand challenges and tackle real world problems. So depending on what the challenge is, it may be better suited to go with a group of environmental or landscape design students from Georgia Tech, which we've done at Oxford several times, or it might be something that's more engineering related, and we want to go to one of the engineering senior capstone teams from Georgia Tech. In other cases, it's something that's more business process related, and so the MBA students at Georgia Tech were a good source, but not just not getting the students at Terry College of Business for UGA either. So I think just being aware that there are opportunities to leverage universities. Universities have a research, education, and a service component, and part of that service component could be helping communities figure out how to transition to more sustainable pathways of development. So by all means, anything I can do to help make those connections as you all think of projects, as others would, if you hear Covington's thinking of a project or a need, utilize Georgia Tech, utilize other universities to extend the bandwidth of capability. And, sometimes it's neat to get some fresh student perspective on things too.
Yeah, it is. Sarah, I didn't ask ahead of time, but I'm going to put you on the spot if you'd be willing to come off mute and just share a little bit about the project. You were the one that pitched it. You were the one that sold it to the students, and you're the one that worked with them. So I think you've got a good insight into what David was talking about.
Yeah. Well, I actually had run into David at the Georgia Climate Conference last November, and we're about to elect, a new mayor. We didn't know at that time, but Sustainable Newton had done a candidate questionnaire, and one of the things that Steve Horton zeroed in on was the compressed natural gas, getting more use out of that. And I had just wondered out loud to David if, is that the way to go versus electric? Because in the news, you're hearing about electric vehicles. So he said that might be a great project for the Sustainable Business Consulting Practicum. And he introduced me to Michael Oxman. And, kind of the rest is history. But I prepared a PowerPoint and got to go to Georgia Tech and pitch the project and just worked with an amazing group of students. They they did the work. So it was connecting them to the city of Covington, and city of Covington was great. They welcomed that opportunity. And in fact, they were so enthusiastic that just this past Monday went back to the city council. And whereas last time I just kind of did the project and then went to the mayor and said, hey, I'm working with this group of students. Can they get this information? This time ahead of it, I said, how about we do this project? So we're actually going to look at how do we encourage residents in Covington and the city to convert to electric vehicles? How do we make it easier for them to go to this new technology? And they unanimously approved the project. So I'll be making another pitch at the end of August, and I'll share those results with you, Mayor and City Council members, because you said that was something that you would look at.
Yes,
Absolutely.
agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just heard that earlier this week from Michael. I guess he had talked to you, or maybe it was today.
Yeah.
He was telling you about that.
Yeah. Well, part of me was when he emailed me, I was just kind of that focused on the pandemic, feeling like I can't do anything. But then when you get the opportunity, just do it and take that one step. That the steps that you can. So that's what we're doing.
Yep. And just to harken back to the value, we've had interactions with the University of Georgia, the College of Environment and Design, and back when Randy was working with the Metropolitan Design Studio, and just really getting the energy that you could feel in the room when we had a charrette in our city community room. And we had, probably 50 people in there with the students, and just a buzz going, and people were really excited, and they were really interested to hear the students' recommendations. And that was back in 2006, but it has carried forward a sense of what's possible and what, opportunities we might explore. And so we re-engaged them a couple of other times over the past few years. And, it's a relatively low risk, low cost, potential high impact investment for communities. And so, I think there's no reason why nonprofits like Sustainable Newton, as evidenced by that project that you all did, can't take advantage of that on behalf of the communities or in full partnership with the cities. I'm a little disheartened by, I feel like I have a bit of a conflict of interest if I were to bring a Oxford project to the center, because I do work for Georgia Tech, but there are definitely challenges that Oxford has. And so, I might turn to my alma mater at UGA and see if we can find a counterpart to tackle some of our issues as well.
We had a great discussion a little bit back about each of you mentioned in some way the need, to make things visible, to share information, to get people on board with some of the things that you want to do. Newton, can we be two leaders?
Maurice, you were breaking up. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, basically what I'm saying is how can we, Sustainable Newton, be a partner and ally to you as leaders, local leaders, to engage people, to inform people, to help you make the things visible that you talked about earlier?
Well, we took, I perused your website and sent it to our person at City Hall that handles our website, and said that there may be a few good ideas that we can glean and, in parentheses, steal, and close paren. Y'all have a really good website, and we're trying to improve ours to provide information that people are interested in and they care about. And it could be, something as simple about is who your representative is and what is his thoughts on, or her thoughts on, sustainability, because I think all of us would like to know that, because we have a senator or two in Washington that don't appear to care, and I may be misreading them, but I kind of doubt it. So that's one way right there. And you had sent a question previously about our pollinator garden and the committee that Laura and I have co-chaired. It's just a committee we just kind of created out of thin air, so to speak. And Laura's been the driving force on it. I've just been observed in amazement. But that's one way around. I've argued for years that one of our assets is our huge rights of way, and we own those. They are not rights of way, really. That is city-owned property. So the thing that Laura and the committee are doing on Wesley Street and then George Street Park is the beginning of a lot of that, I hope. But breaking the mold, we have a lot. I've advocated for pocket parks on little small tracts of land that the city owns, not playground parks, just visually parks, just visually pleasant places to see, a bench or two, or a water fountain or something that they can put green in on Patrick's Day, St. Patrick's Day. But we've got a lot over on Long Street Circle that we've advocated that to do that. But then we also still have that element in the back of our minds, and I always have it because I was a real estate broker, of developing that, selling it to somebody for development. So which do you do? How do you? There is the microcosm of the conflict right there.
Well, I feel sort of like we're this little island in the north end of the county. And I know that there are other patches of trees, but I feel like we've got a good circle around us. And I think any preservation of that we can do, not diminishing tree cover by development, is a good thing, a positive thing, because, I see the north end of the county sort of going more and more towards subdivisions and things like that. So, you know how I feel, Jim. I'd like to see it all stay green. So.
I don't disagree with you. I just had to put, that I understand both aspects of it because I was a real estate broker, and I'm also a human being that has to live in this planet. And I have great grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I like to think about their future, not just my future, because I don't have much of one. The in reality, I mean, you know, let's face it, when you get to be my age, there's not a heck of a lot stretching out in front of you. I'm not 10 foot tall and bulletproof any longer. But that's the basic conflict that we're having to deal with is, you know, we had that idea that we needed to develop to get some income to replace the possibility of losing income. So now we want to sell off these little pieces of property that we came into. And we all know, if you don't believe it, go look at Town Center. They had to stop work out there because they cut down trees that they weren't supposed to cut down. But that's the way developers do it. It's easier to push all the trees over, get them out of your way, then build what you want to build, and come put in about 100 little saplings. And it's just not the same thing. And 9 times out of 10, the saplings are not native. They may be at Town Center, I don't know, but they're not typically native. They're fast-growing trees that are not generally native. I see you smiling, David. Do you disagree?
No, not at all. No, I'm smiling about the Town Center. I can't say Town Center without cracking a smile because there's nothing center about that space and really nothing reflective of the town that Covington is reflected in that space. And it's, you know, I think just creating a new sprawling situation for Covington and new competition is probably going to, if it ever does take off, you know, it could have the same effect that development on 138 had to the old Salem Gate Shopping Center. And if you know you go by there now, there is no shopping center there anymore. So Newton Plaza might suffer the same fate. Unfortunately, we have a great picturesque little town square that's doing great, you know, very viable right now. But you know, just creating something that's going to draw commerce away from the heart of Covington just pains me a little bit. And of course, you have to say it's also a further encroachment on Oxford because, you know, it ties in with City Pond Road / Williams Street / East Soul Street, which, you know, people will be going that way from our side of the county, from the north and west side, cutting through Oxford to get over to shop there, or maybe if they live over there, they might be cutting through, you know, to avoid going through town otherwise. So, you know, we're concerned about how will that increase traffic through Oxford and on Emory Street, et cetera, as it draws more people coming and going there. But kind of going to back to your point about, or question about how can Sustainable Newton help us? You know, I think helping us to connect our efforts within the island that we are, that, as Laura said, connecting it to a broader regional effort. You know, if you understand, as Theodosia knows, biology and ecology, and as Melissa also knows, the connectivity and, you know, of development of those natural corridors is very important. And so as we look at our undeveloped rights of way or streets that Jim says, you know, we own, and think of those as not just linear parks, but also a part of a connective tissue of ecological value. How do we connect that with something broader? And we've had conversation about, you know, Dried Indian Creek is, you know, a part of the ecosystem that we're connected to, but it starts north of us, right near Flint Hill Elementary School, backside of that, and flows all the way into, I think it flows in the Yellow River. Anyway, it's part of the Upper Ocmulgee River Basin. So the Upper Ocmulgee River Basin. So, you know, we are here in Oxford connected to a larger basin, and, you know, Dried Indian Creek also cuts right through Covington, goes by City Hall. So, you know, that's part of that connected tissue, and it's and creating those corridors has a lot of ecological value, as well as just a good, you know, connective element. So keeping us tied in with a broader effort and not being an island from a sort of socio-political perspective as well as ecologically.
Since Jim brought up native species, I think that's something else that just you all as a larger voice in the community can help with. Perhaps you already are, but I think vocalizing about using native species instead of non-native species is absolutely critical. I don't know if anybody's been reading Ptolemy's works, Doug Ptolemy, who's a professor at University of Delaware, I think, but his books are Nature's Best Hope and Bringing Nature Home. And he advocates very heavily for, we're running out of space. And certainly here in the East, people's yards can serve as little islands, and also connecting those islands, extending habitats of native species. Oh, yay, go Juanita.
I see it.
Yes. But he makes incredibly critical points about the fact that anything that goes back into the ground really should be native. And it breaks my heart because, nurseries just seem to have this penchant for growing and propagating and pushing non-native species. And I haven't been up to check the trees, but Jim, you just gave me a little mini heart attack. I saw them putting trees back and I thought, well, thank goodness, but I didn't even think that they wouldn't be, native species. So I'll cross my fingers on that. But I think that the larger voice should always, have that, being, I don't know. I think it needs to be said all the time. Just things should be native.
Absolutely. But
Yep.
the other point is that this is our last opportunity in Newton County, I do believe, to establish wildlife corridors for the transitional to maintain diversity within the wildlife groups, but also that where they can move around the county with some sense of safety and et cetera.
Yeah.
And the other, just a general question to you guys, if I may, what do you see in Oxford that you think would be an opportunity for us that you have visited here? Maurice, I know you've biked around town, but Theodosia, of course, spent about half her life over here, the other half at home, and et cetera. And is there something you see that we don't see, or something you would suggest, other than re-engineering our streets, which I'd love to get on straight away? Because we got to deal with a problem coming with town center, and one way to do it is to do it now before they get interested in what we're doing over here.
Anyone else want to take that one before?
You didn't know I was going to turn the tables on you, did you?
Oh, I've got thoughts, but I'd like to give somebody else a chance.
Looks like Sarah's got something.
Sarah?
Yes.
I can say something, and I've said this to before to the council members, but because I have a vegetable delivery business, mainly in Oxford and Covington. So I'm in Oxford every week. But one of the things I notice is that there's not really a town, like a real town center, a gathering point for Oxford. And I know there's not the desire to develop a big commercial center, but to develop some center, something for people, more than the post office, for people to walk to and to kind of have those chances to interact, because Randy and I, developed in Clark's Grove, and we're really involved in Covington. And that's one of the things I see happening there, now with the development of the Cricket Frog Trail, that's going to be bringing people together, but it will be bringing them through the heart of neighborhoods and the town center. So that's one of the things I notice is driving through every week.
What would you think of putting up a nice, very nicely designed pavilion, not really a pavilion, but a pavilion-like structure in the middle of that greensward where to set up on Thursday afternoons with the gardeners and everything, in order for people to come and have a real farm to market kind of a situation there? Do you think that would fulfill? You've had a lot of experience in those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I don't do farmers market, so I know the Oxford Farm comes up there, so they might appreciate that, some permanent shade.
Yeah.
They don't have to maybe bring their tent. Yeah, something like that could be good. Maybe, I don't know if you'd ever go to having concerts, something to gather people.
It'd be a place to have that, and create a park behind Yarborough House and behind the green space. We own all of that land in there. And I think it's a fabulous opportunity to create a community center or sense of community center without necessarily creating a lot of retail space. A pavilion on that greensbard could be constructed in such a way that if as time went by, people wanted to put in, excuse me, Mike, a coffee shop, it could be attached to that pavilion, and the pavilion could end up being a mall. You see where I'm kind of going with that? I don't know if that would make sense to you or not. And of course, if you had a park behind that, it was a really established garden park, then that would be a draw to the center as well. Does any of that make sense, or would you find that attractive? Or?
And I think that when you say like a coffee shop, that's some type of commercial thing can bring people together, a place to get a little bite to eat. I mean, you look at bread and butter, the way that's attracting Oxford students. You go in there not during a pandemic.
That's right.
That's a hangout, and like book groups are meeting there. That type of thing. Something that maybe Oxford people don't have to get in their car and drive to Covington to.
Yeah.
So Jim, I'm thinking about the market that is, of course, Daniel bringing his food, and then the lady who always brings her plants, and that is a gathering. People do come and just kind of hang out and stay a little longer and talk. And that's a great space, I think, because people drive by and see what's going on and stop. And then also I'm thinking about the little coffee house that was right there next to the church for a while. I know it's gone defunct, but that was something I was really hoping would continue, because I agree it's close and it's a good interaction between the college and the college students and the college faculty with community. So I thought, that's another thing to think about always. I think it's an issue for the college and it's an issue for the town. How do we do more things together seamlessly, so we're not having to plan real hard around it, but it just creatively, sort of organically, people are getting together from both. And I think that space would be great. Having a place to sit, having a place to pick up something to drink while you're sitting there, or snack, and then, having that market and maybe expanding the market so that there might be other vendors coming. I think those things are great.
We have not promoted that as well as we should have.
Yeah.
But if it's intended for anybody within Newton County or the contiguous counties to bring things that they produce to sell. Well, it doesn't matter what's art or what it is, as long as they produce it.
And there's no fee.
And there's no fee. It's a free permit, but you got to have a permit. And you can't go to the farmer's market and bring it over there and sell it. So you sign an affidavit that you created that in your garden, grew it, whatever. So we have had a little sporadic success, I would say. We haven't promoted the way we should have, because those are the kind of things that will lead to community-based organic growth of retail space, where you can't zone those things into existence. They have to develop organically to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So.
Well, and Jim, we certainly enjoyed with the Solarize program. We came out, we got a permit, and we came out to that market several times to sort of Mike helped me bring brochures, and we stood around and just talked to people as they were coming up. So it was a great opportunity for us to get information out, even though we weren't selling anything and we didn't make anything. We were just kind of promoting something sustainable. And Matt Pepper felt like that was, part of the mission of that market. So we appreciated that.
Absolutely. without question.
As far as I
I would-
know, isn't that farmers market that Daniel and Debbie and a few others have been doing on Thursdays? Isn't that the only one in Newton or even the contiguous counties? Do you guys know of any other farm to market?
The only thing I know about is that place in Madison that I think is a organic store of some sort.
Farm
Okay.
food.
Yeah.
And Monroe has just started they have a farmer's market, a weekly farmer's, I don't know if during the pandemic they do, but they have a weekly farmer's market, Saturday market, and then they just started Monroe Locally Grown, which you go online and you order what you want, and then you pick up at a central location from a variety of farmers. Athens Locally Grown is the model. It's a great thing for farmers, because a small farmer like me, it's really hard. I don't want to pick all my lettuce, bring it to the market, and it doesn't sell. I can't put it back in the garden. So I'm only harvesting what is sold.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing magic about Thursday, and Thursday's not cast in stone. We just had to pick a day to get the ball rolling. But
Well, I think it was Jim, that was driven as far as why Daniel's there, because of trying to balance the schedule of also delivering to Emory. And so, that's when they could best do it. But as far as you're right, as far as when we offer it or when we make it available, it doesn't have to be a Thursday afternoon or Thursday day. We do have to be mindful of, are there competitors, if Daniel used to go out to Monroe on Saturdays. So trying to compete with Daniel for Saturday would not be a good idea, but part of it is just creating the space, right? That's there for people to gather. And right now in the summer, it's not as hospitable as it could be and as we could make it.
yeah, if we had a pavilion there, we could also have concerts
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, or could even have an outdoor play. I mean, that would be good. You could put up temporary set design, that sort of thing, or an experimental play. It's just, I remember one of the most enjoyable Sunday afternoons I spent in the Newton County was about 40 years ago. No, really, that's how long I've been around. About 40 years ago, Oxford had a concert by the Atlanta Pops Orchestra. It was on the quad, and they played An American in Paris, and they played the music from American in Paris, and it was just fabulous. It just plain fabulous. And there's no reason in the world that someone like Oxford can't have things like Chastain Park, and those kinds of things. And if you had that area behind the Yarborough House into a really nice garden, there's lots of shade there. And if the concert was facing in that direction, you could have the little tables, the bottles of wine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I think where we have an easy consensus is that we have the germ of something really good in that space. And if we're creative and cautious, I think there's great potential to bring the community together in ways that we haven't thought of yet.
It's fabulous potential, just absolutely fabulous potential. I'd love and I'll throw something else out when I'm talking to you guys to get just kind of a feeling for things. I would like very much to see the Yarborough House as a Black and Indigenous Peoples History Museum, especially where Newton County is concerned, where the indigenous peoples of Newton County, it's sort of a natural history museum, as it were, where they could go and study the things that Theodosia taught and that sort of thing. And because there's some truly interesting things in Newton County and it's I thought Cherokees were here, but it weren't the Cherokees. It was a division of the Creeks.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole different ball game. And now, there's opportunities there. There's just, as you said, Laura, we're a little jewel on the north side.
There you go. Well, I don't want to cut us off, but I do kind of want to stick to the promised schedule. And you guys have been really generous to spend this time with us. I want to thank all three of you for being the kind of leaders that are so engaging, that are so open and accessible, and also that you're leaders who share the things that we're trying to accomplish. So we really appreciate you participating with us in this. We certainly want to continue to be an asset for you to move the things forward that you're trying to do, and you certainly are an asset for us. So thanks for that, and thanks everybody else who joined this evening. And we will save this and put it on the website and our social media for the folks that weren't able to join us. But this was a very beneficial, very helpful, and I thank you guys for that.
Well,
Thank you.
and we want to
Thank
thank you all. I mean, we really see Sustainable Newton as a great advocacy organization within Newton County for the things that we value, and we love the thought of continuing to partner with y'all on other things as we move forward.
Okay. All right. Well,
Thank
thanks everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you.
Good
Good night.
evening.
Good seeing y'all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All righty.